name is Kelly Frantz-Langford, and this is my EDL 854 Mod 1 on finance. A quick introduction to me. These are my 3 kiddos and a picture of my family. Our oldest graduated and has started his freshman year at college. Our middle guy is the one in the football uniform, and he is a sophomore in high school, and we spend a lot of time watching his sports. Our youngest just started kindergarten and is loving it. And then we have a family photo that unfortunately is 2 years old, but that's how life goes. I am the assistant director for TARC's Children's Services program. And in that department, the program that most closely relates to this class is our Tiny K program. Tiny K is the Birth to 3 special education program in the state of Kansas. Our network serves Shawnee County. We're the 3rd largest network in the state. And last year, we served 900 children. And Tiny K networks operate very differently than school districts, but some Tiny K networks can be a part of school districts. So it's a little confusing. I'm actually a Greenbush employee, and so I really have the benefit of working for 2 amazing organizations. Some of my professional activities include I am the current president of the Tiny K Alliance, which is an advocacy network for all of our Tiny K programs across the state. And I am also on the Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund Early Childhood Advisory Panel. So let's talk about the top 10 school finance tips that I learned from our readings. First, being in Tiny K, our budgets are somewhat similar and yet also very different. And so I learned that some building administrators are given a budget, whether that's from called centralized budgeting from their district, where they have very little say in what happens within their budget, mostly over consumable materials. Although district-wide, this could help with equity amongst the schools, and sometimes it is more economical because of things like volume purchasing. If there is more local school control, that's called site-based management or school-based management. And this is where more autonomy is given to the building principal to set and maintain their own budget. The principal's responsibilities can vary greatly, depending on the range from whether they are given a budget, if it's a centralized budget, or whether it's a school-based or site-based management system. There's also a lot of range in how the day-to-day accounting is done. So, one of the things that I learned from these articles was more in-depth knowledge around account keeping. And this really involves storing financial data so that reports can be generated, and sometimes it's completed by the principal, but generally with the help of accountants. I am extremely fortunate, and even though I am the assistant director of our department, our director works very closely with me and gives me lots of opportunities to give input into the budget and manage the budget. We are also very fortunate at TARC that we have a finance department, and so really my accounting duties are fairly minimal in that I complete the requisitions and give input into the budget, set our budgetary goals, look at and change the budget, but I don't have to do some of these extreme tasks that I would be very concerned if I was the principal having to do all of the accounting as well. As another definition of income, so income, of course, is the money flowing into the network. In Tiny K, those are state grants, which combine state and federal dollars, other grants that we have to apply for, fundraising, insurance, CAD aid, and other contributions. And then all of those income sources have to be monitored for the relevant requirements, regulations, and rules. The income statement, I'm again grateful that our finance department gives us an income statement, which reports the revenue and spending, and we get that monthly. I did learn about the gross profit margin, even though I think I knew sort of what it was. I didn't necessarily understand the distinct definition, and I didn't know that it was calculated by dividing the gross profit by the revenues. A balance sheet, which I am becoming more familiar with. I think I've relied too heavily on our director, who does a phenomenal job, but I certainly recognize through this course that I need to pay more attention to this. But it is a quick glance at financial health, showing what the net value is of the program. What was really interesting to me, and I didn't know this, is that there is research to support that when principals have more control over their budget, there are better outcomes for students. I really hadn't thought in the past about a centralized budget versus principals having more control, so that was a very interesting component for me to learn. And also recognizing how much influence the state and local control has. And so really looking at some of those school finance formulas and how they're determined. Tiny K is also subject to a finance formula based on the live birth rate in the county, which we have very little control over, and then the number of students we have enrolled over any given year. Being part of the Tiny K Alliance and the program coordinator for several years, I can tell you that I absolutely agree that advocacy work around those funding formulas is critical. So again, in summary, our specific program has a lot of control over the budget. Of course, we work with our executive director, who reports to the board, and our finance department. But we are able to really set our priorities. We can flex funds throughout the year. We have the ability to switch tracks and move funding if needed and within the bounds of those regulations. And I'm very fortunate to have a director who has excellent management over the budget and shares that decision making with me. It's been a great learning opportunity for me. Some of the concerns, I don't know that I would say it has to do with her at all, but I can say that some of our concerns over our budget is that really, in addition, I know that all school districts have minimal federal dollars, about 10% of the budget, but in Tiny K, it's minimal federal and state dollars, in that most Tiny K programs rely heavily on categorical aid and insurance Medicaid reimbursement. And so while a per pupil funding formula sort of is allotted to each program, it's actually fairly minimal in the cost to the program, which means that local programs are responsible for applying and administering grants, and all of those grants have a lot of restrictions on how they're used, and then also fundraising. And in addition to it being time consuming, oftentimes applying for smaller grants, or sometimes along with the challenges of fundraising, is that people will donate dollars to supplies or programs, but our biggest expense is always salaries. And so finding grants that cover salaries can be a challenge. And of course, the fear, particularly right now in an economic downturn, is that those grant funding sources will dry up and some of those restrictions get even heavier during these times. And so those are some of the concerns that we think about with the Tiny K program. These are my references, and I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.